Hi everybody, I'm Esther. Welcome to my English grammar course on the tenses. I'm going to teach you how to use the 12 tenses in the past, present, and future. It's a great course and there's a lot of important information. So keep watching. Hi everybody, my name is Esther. I'm so excited to teach you the present simple tense in today's video. Now this lesson can be a little difficult, so I'll do my best to keep it easy and fun for you. My goal is for you to understand how and when to use this grammar by the end of the video. Let's get started. Let's start with the first usage for the present simple tense. The first usage is pretty easy. We use it to talk about facts, truths, and generalizations. Let's look at some examples. The sun is bright. Now that's a fact. It doesn't change. Everybody knows that the sun is bright. It was bright yesterday, it's bright today, and it will be bright tomorrow. That makes it a fact. Pigs don't fly. That's also a fact. Everybody knows that pigs don't fly. Cats are better than dogs. Now this you may not agree with. This is my truth. I'm making a generalization about cats and dogs in this example. And finally, it's cold in winter. This really depends on where you live, but for a lot of people, or let's say for most people, it is cold in the winter. So that's the truth for some people. Now, let's look back and see what verb I used in the present simple tense. For the first sentence, we have is. I used the be verb is to talk about the sun. In the next sentence, I used the negative of do not. And you'll notice I used a contraction and put these two words together to make it don't. Cats are better than dogs. I used the be verb are to talk about cats because cats is plural. And finally, it's cold in winter. Here, I used the be verb is again, but I used a contraction to combine it and is and made its. Let's move on to the next usage. We also use the present simple tense to talk about habits and routines. So things and actions that happen regularly. Let's look at the examples. I always eat lunch at noon. You'll notice I use the adverb always because I'm talking about something that I do regularly. What is that? Eat lunch at noon. So I use the present simple tense. And here I use the verb eat. I eat. The second example says you play games every day. Do you see the clue that helps you know that this is something that happens regularly? It's every day. So it's something that happens as a routine or a habit. So you play games. The verb here is play. You play. The next example says Seth starts work at 9 a.m. daily. Again, this is something that happens regularly. Seth goes to work at 9 a.m. every day. Now you'll notice I put a blue line under the S in starts. Can you figure out why? Well, remember that when the subject of a sentence is he, she, or it, we need to add an S or ES to the end of the verb in the present simple tense. Seth is a he, so we need to add an S. Seth starts work at 9 a.m. daily. And the last example, they study English every Monday. Again, every Monday means that they do it regularly. And that's why we use the present simple tense. They study. So as a review, remember, we use the present simple tense to talk about habits and routines that happen regularly. Let's move on. We also use the present simple tense with non-continuous verbs. These are verbs that we don't use in the continuous form, even if they're happening right now. They're also called stated verbs. These are connected with thoughts, opinions, feelings, emotions, and our five senses. Let's look at the examples. I love my mom. The verb here is love. That's an emotion. So I use the present simple tense. It smells good. Smell is one of the 5 senses. So I use the present simple tense. You'll notice I underlined the S because remember, the subject is it. Kelly feels happy. This is talking about a feeling. Again, the subject here is Kelly, which is a she. So I added an S to the verb. And finally, they need help. We don't say they are needing help, even though it's happening right now. Need is non-continuous, so we say they need help. So remember, you also use the present simple tense with non-continuous verbs connected with thoughts, opinions, feelings, emotions, and our 5 senses. Let's move on. Speakers occasionally use the present simple tense to talk about something that will happen in the near future. Now, this can be a little confusing, but we're not using the future tense. We're using the present simple tense. It's possible to do that, and it's actually common for people to do that. Again, for something that will happen in the near future. Let's look at the examples. I have class at 6 p.m. 6 p.m., that's pretty soon. So I can say I have class, the present simple tense. Lisa arrives on Sunday. Again, the near future, Sunday. So I use the present simple tense. I added an S at the end of arrive because Lisa, the subject, is a she. We start work soon. Again, the near future, soon. So I use the present simple verb start. And finally, my students come tomorrow. This is something that will happen in the near future, so I use the verb come. So remember, it is possible and it is common to use the present simple tense to talk about something that will happen in the near future. Let's go to the next usage. Let's talk about a possible negative usage for the present simple tense, and that is do not and does not. The first example says Mike eats bread. I put an S at the end of eat because the subject is Mike, which is a he. Now that's not a negative statement. What happens when I want to turn it into a negative statement? Well, I change it like this. Mike doesn't eat bread. So you'll notice that I didn't move the S here, okay? Instead, I added doesn't. I took does and not, and I turned it into a contraction by combining the two and making it doesn't. So if the subject is he, she, or it, we use does not or doesn't to make it negative. You swim well. In this case, I don't need to put an S at the end of swim because the subject is you. If I want to make this sentence negative, I use don't. You don't swim well. I use the contraction for do and not. I combine them to make don't. So if the subject is I, you, we, or they, we use do not or don't. So to review, do not and does not or don't and doesn't is a possible usage for the negative for present simple tense. Let's continue on. Now I'll talk about one possible question form for the present simple tense, and that is by using do or does. So let's look at the example. They live here. That's not a question, right? They live here. In order to turn it into a question, it's really simple. All I have to do is add do to the beginning and add a question mark at the end. Do they live here? So if the subject is I, you, we, or they, simply add do to the beginning of the question. How about this one? He plays soccer. In this statement, the subject is he, and that's why you should know by now I have an S at the end of play. However, to turn this into a question, I add does at the beginning. Does he play soccer? What you'll notice here is that I no longer have the S at the end of play. Instead, I just use does at the beginning. So for he, she, or it, put does at the beginning. And don't worry about putting an S or ES at the end of the verb. So to review, One possible way of forming a question for the present simple tense is using do or does at the beginning. All right, let's move on. Let's start with the first checkup. In this checkup, I want you to focus on the be verbs. Remember, be verbs in the present simple tense can be is, am, or are. Take a look at the first sentence. It says, she blank at school. The subject of this sentence is she. What be verb do we use for she? The correct answer is. Now, if you were thinking of the negative, the correct answer would be she isn't or she is not. That's correct as well. And if we want to use a contraction for she is, we can say she's at school. For the next one, it says they blank 20 years old. The subject of this sentence is they. What be verb do we use for they? The correct answer is are. For the negative, you can also use aren't or are not. Also, if you want to use the contraction for they are, you can say they're 20 years old. The next sentence says, his father blank busy. The subject of this sentence is his father. What subject pronoun do we use for his father? The correct answer is he. Remember, for he, she, it, the be verb is. For the negative, we can say isn't or is not. And for a contraction for father and is, we can say his father's busy. Now, I want you to try to find the mistakes in this sentence. We isn't good friends. Did you find the mistake? This is the mistake. The subject is we, and the be verb is are. Therefore, the correct answer is we are not, or the contraction we aren't good friends. The next sentence, can you find the mistake? Are John a teacher? Think about the subject of this sentence. The subject is John. And John, the subject pronoun, is he. Therefore, we don't use are, we use is. Is John a teacher? Is John a teacher? And finally, it am a puppy. This one is a big mistake. The subject here is it. What be verb do we use for it? The correct answer is. So we don't say it am a puppy, we say it is a puppy. Great job, guys. Let's move on to the next checkup. For the next checkup, I want you to think of some other verbs in the present simple tense. Take a look at the first sentence. He blank. I want you to think of the verb like his dinner. What do we do to the verb when the subject is he, she, or it? Remember, we add an S. He likes his dinner. For the negative, you can also say he doesn't like his dinner. The next sentence says, my students blank. I want you to think of need books. What is the subject pronoun for my students? The correct answer is they. If the subject is I, you, we, or they in the present simple tense, we don't change the verb. We keep it as is. So the correct answer is, my students need books. Now for the negative, you can say, my students don't need books. The next sentence says, I blank, think of the verb live, in London. What do we do here? Again, the subject is I. Therefore, we don't change the verb. The correct answer is, I live in London. What's the negative? I don't live in London. For the next part, I would like for you to try to find the mistake in the sentence. He doesn't likes math. What's the error here? Well, this is a negative. He doesn't. That's correct. However, we do not add an S when we have doesn't in front of it. Do he eat candy? Here we have a question. The subject of this sentence is he. For he, she, it, when we're making a sentence in the present simple tense, we use does, not do. So the correct answer is, does he eat candy? And finally, Sam is play computer games. There are two present simple verbs here, and we can't have that. So the correct way to fix this sentence is to get rid of the is. So take that out and say, Sam plays computer games. Add an S because the subject is Sam, which is a he. Great job. Let's move on to the next practice. For this next practice, we're taking a look at routines. Remember, the present simple tense can be used to describe events that happen regularly. Let's take a look at the first sentence. We blink the bus every day, and I want you to use the verb take. Here we see the clue word every day, which shows that this is a routine. The subject of this sentence is we. In the present simple tense, remember, if the subject is I, you, we, or they, we do not change the verb. Therefore, the correct answer is we take the bus every day. In the second sentence, it says he blinked to school every morning. Again, a routine. The subject here is he. What do we do if the subject is he, she, or it? We add S or ES to the verb. In this example, the verb is go. So we have to add ES. He goes to school every morning. In the next sentence, it says Lizzie not play, in parentheses, tennis. Here, I want you to think about the negative form. Lizzie is a she. The subject pronoun is she. So what do we do for the negative? We say does not, or the contraction doesn't play tennis. We do not add an S or ES to the end of the verb. Instead, we say doesn't or does not. Now, I want you to find the mistake in the next sentence. They watches TV at night. Can you figure out what's wrong with this sentence? The subject is they. Therefore, remember, we do not change the verb. We say watch. They watch TV at night. In the next sentence or question, it says, does he plays soccer every week? The subject of this sentence is he. To make a sentence, putting does at the beginning is okay. However, we don't put an S at the end of play. Therefore, the correct answer is to simply say, does he play soccer every week? And finally, he always forgets his book. In this case, the subject is he. Remember again, for he, she, it, we add S or ES to the end of the verb. What's the verb in the sentence? It's forget. Therefore, we have to say, he always forgets his book. Great job. Let's move on to the next practice. In this checkup, we'll take a look at how the present simple tense can be used to describe future events. Take a look at the first sentence. It says the airplane blinked tonight, and we're looking at the verb leave. What is the subject of this sentence? The correct answer is airplane. What subject pronoun do we use for airplane? It's it. Remember, in the present simple tense for he, she, it, we add an S or ES to the verb. The verb here is leave, so we simply add an S. The correct answer is, the airplane leaves tonight. In the second sentence, it says, does the movie blink soon? And we're using the verb start. What is the subject of this sentence? It's movie. And what subject pronoun do we use for movie? It's it. So it's like saying, does it blink soon? Well, this is a question. So we already have the correct word in the front, does. For he, she, it, when we're asking a question, we use does. Now, all we have to do is use the same verb in its base form. So, does the movie start soon? We do not add an S or ES here. Finally, it says, Vicky blink tomorrow. The subject of this sentence is Vicky. Vicky is a girl, so the subject pronoun is she. You'll remember now that in this case, we put works. W-O-R-K-S. Works. Vicky works tomorrow. Now, let's find the mistakes in the sentence below. He do leave at 3:30 p.m. Actually, there's only one mistake. Can you find it? He do leave at 3:30 p.m. We do not need the do here. We only use do in a question or in the negative form. But also the subject is he, so we would use does. Either way, we don't need this here. Well, now we have the verb leave with the subject he. Do you know what to do? We simply change this to leaves, just like we did in the first sentence. He leaves at 3:30 p.m. In the next sentence, they don't start school today. We have a negative sentence. They don't. That's correct. Do not is correct for subject pronoun they. However, in the negative form, we don't have to change the main verb at all. Therefore, all we will do is say they don't start school today. No S. Finally, does we eat at noon? Take a look. What is the subject or subject pronoun in this sentence? The correct answer is we. Think about the question form. Do we say do or does in the question form for the subject pronoun we? The correct answer is do. We say do. So the correct way to say this sentence or question is, do we eat at noon? Great job, guys. You're done with the practice. Thank you for your hard work. Let's move on. Good job, guys. You put in a lot of practice today. The present simple tense is not easy, and I'm really happy to see how hard you guys worked on mastering it. Be sure to check out my other videos, and thank you for watching this video. I'll see you next time. Bye! Hi everybody, I'm Esther. I'm so excited to be teaching you the present continuous tense in this video. This tense is used to describe an action that's happening right now, a longer action in progress, and something happening in the near future. There's a lot to learn, but don't worry, I'll guide you through it. Let's get started. The present continuous tense is used to talk about actions that are happening right now. For example, I'm teaching English, and you are studying English. Let's take a look at some more examples. The first sentence says, he is watching a movie. We start with the subject and a be verb. In this case, the subject is he. For he, she, and it, we use the be verb is. Then you'll notice I added an ing to the end of the verb watch. He is watching a movie. The next sentence says, Tim is playing a computer game. He's doing that right now. Tim is a he. Therefore, again, we use the be verb is. And again, you'll notice I added ing to the end of the verb. The next sentence says, the machine is making a noise. Now pay attention to the subject, the machine. What is the proper pronoun? The answer is it. Therefore, we use the be verb is. The machine is making a noise. We can also say it is making a noise or the contraction it's making a noise. And finally, Tom and Ben are speaking English. In this case, you'll notice that we use the be verb are. Can you figure out why? That's because Tom and Ben, the subject pronoun for these two is they. They are speaking English. Let's move on to the next usage. The present continuous tense is also used to describe a longer action in progress, even though you might not be doing the action right now. Let's take a look at some examples. The first sentence says, I'm reading an interesting book these days. In this case, the subject is I, so the be verb is am. In this example, we use the contraction I'm by putting I and am together. Again, you'll notice there's an ing after the verb. The next sentence says, you are studying to become an English teacher. The subject here is you. Therefore, the be verb is are. Next, Stephen is preparing for the IELTS exam. The subject here is Stephen, which is a he. Therefore, we use the be verb is. And finally, John and June are working at a company. If you look at the subject John and June, the pronoun for that is they. That's why we use the be verb are. They are working at a company. Let's move on to the next usage. The present continuous is also used to talk about near future plans. Let's take a look. She is meeting some friends tonight. That's going to happen in the near future. You'll notice that we have she, so the be verb is, and then we added an ing to the end of the verb meet. The next example says, we are going on vacation in July. The subject here is we, therefore we use the be verb are. We can also use a contraction and say, we're going on vacation in July. Again, another near future plan. The next example says, David is learning to drive tomorrow. Tomorrow is the near future. David is the subject. David is a he, so we use is. And lastly, Vicky and I are teaching English next week. Vicky and I, if we think about the subject pronoun, is we. That's why we used are. We are teaching. Let's move on. Now, let's talk about the negative form of the present continuous tense. I have some examples here. These two examples are for actions that are happening right now or longer actions. These last two are for near future plans. Let's take a look. The first sentence says, I am not having fun. Now, that's not true for me because I am having fun, but in this example, I am not having fun. You'll notice that the word not goes between the be verb and the verb ing. In the second example, it says Jane isn't doing her homework. Here, we use the contraction isn't for is not. So just like the first sentence, we put not between is and verb ing. The next sentence says, you're not seeing him tonight. Here, we have a contraction for you are. You're not seeing him tonight. And finally, we are not running tomorrow morning. Here, we have the subject we. Therefore, we use the be verb are. Don't forget to add a not after that to make it negative. Let's move on. Now, let's talk about how to form be-verb questions in the present continuous tense. The first example here says, is he waiting for you? Or is he waiting for you? We start with the be-verb. Take a look at the subject though. The subject is he, and that's why we start with the be-verb is. Is he waiting for you? You can answer, yes, he is, or no, he isn't. The second sentence says, are you coming to class? The subject here is you, and that's why we start with are. Are you coming to class? You can answer, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. The next question says, is he preparing to study in Canada? The subject is he, and so we start with is. The answer can be, yes, he is, or it can also be, no, he isn't. Finally, the last question says, are they going out tonight? The subject here is they, and so we start with are. The answer can be, yes, they are, or no, they aren't. Let's move on. Now, let's talk about the WH question form for the present continuous tense. I have some examples here, and you'll notice that we start with the WH questions. What, where, when, who, why, and how. What comes after? You'll notice it's the be verbs, are, is, and if the subject is I, am. So after that, you have the subject and then the verb ing. Let's take a look at the first sentence. What are you doing? I'm asking about right now. For example, I'm teaching English. Where are you going? I'm going to the store. When is it starting? It's starting at 3. I can be talking about a movie, a show, anything can be it. Who is she talking to? She's talking to Bob. Why is she crying? She's crying because she's sad. And finally, how is it going? It's going well. For this checkup of the present continuous tense, we'll look at how this tense can be used to describe an action that's happening right now. Let's take a look at the first sentence. You blank learning English. Remember, for this tense, we start with the subject and the be verb, and then the verb ing. We already have the verb ing here, so we need the be verb. The subject in the first sentence is you. For you, we, and they, we use the be verb are. So the correct answer is, you are learning English right now. The next sentence says, she blank not watching TV. This is the negative form of the present continuous tense. We have the word not before the verb ing. However, we're missing the be verb again. What is the be verb to use if the subject is she? The correct answer is. She is not watching TV. This one says, I blank studying now. The subject here is I. Again, think of the be verb that goes for the subject I. The be verb is am. I am studying now. We can also use a contraction and say, I'm studying now. If we wanted to turn this into the negative form, we can also say, I'm not studying now. Now, take a look at the next sentence and find the mistake. Layla is watch a movie. Here we have the subject, and the subject pronoun for Layla would be she. We have the correct be verb, is. However, you'll notice we forgot the ing at the end of the verb. We need to say watching. Layla is watching a movie. The next sentence says they playing soccer now. What's missing? If you got it, the correct answer is we need the be verb are because the subject is they. They are playing soccer now. And finally, what do you do? If you want to ask somebody what they're doing right now, you say what, and the be verb are you doing. What are you doing? Let's move on to the next practice. For this checkup, we'll talk about the present continuous tense and how it can be used to describe an action that started in the past and continues today. It's a longer action. Let's take a look at the first sentence. He blank studying economics. Remember, for this tense, we take the subject, a be verb, and then verb ing. Here, we already have the verb ing, studying. So, what are we missing? The be verb. The correct be verb for the subject he is. So, he is studying economics. The next sentence says they're blank for the fight. The verb we want to use is train. Now, we already have the be verb here. It's in the contraction there because it's they are. All we have to do now is add ing to the verb. They're training for the fight these days. And we blank teaching at the school. Again, we're missing the be verb. What is the be verb for we? The correct answer is are. We are teaching at the school. Now, let's look for the mistakes in the next sentence. Ben is studying to become a doctor. Can you find the error? Well, we have the subject and we have the proper be verb. What we're missing is the ing at the end of study. The correct answer is Ben is studying to become a doctor. Let's look at the next sentence. I don't reading that book. I don't reading that book? To form the negative in the present continuous, we don't use do or does. We use the be verb. What is the be verb for I? The correct answer is am. I am not reading that book. There is no contraction for am not. Finally, they are to learn English. We have the subject and we have the correct be verb, but remember, we need verb ing. Therefore, the correct answer is they are learning English. Let's move on to the next checkup. For this checkup, we'll take a look at how the present continuous tense can be used to talk about future plans. Let's take a look. The first sentence says, they're play a game tonight. The verb we want to use is play. Remember, we start with the subject, and here we have it, they. Then we have the be verb. In this case, we used a contraction for they are, there. That's correct. After that, we have to add ing to the end of the verb. So the correct answer is, they're playing a game tonight. The next sentence says, we blank not studying tomorrow. Looks good, but there's a word that's missing. This is the negative form because we have not. We simply need the be verb for we. The correct be verb is are. We are not studying tomorrow. The next sentence says, Lynn is blank out tonight, and we want to use the verb go. Remember, Lynn and then the be verb is, that's correct. All we have to do is add ing, going. Lynn is going out tonight. To make this negative, you can say Lynn is not going out tonight or Lynn isn't going out tonight. The next sentence says, Laura isn't study this evening. Can you find the mistake? Remember, we have to add ing to the end of the verb. So we need to say Laura isn't studying this evening. The next sentence says, my sons will playing chess later. We are talking about a future plan, so you might be tempted to use will. However, instead of saying will, we use the be verb. My sons are playing chess later. And finally, she's not to eating dinner tonight. There's an extra word in here that we don't need. What is it? It's to. Remember, subject, be verb, not, verb, ing. We do not need to in this sentence. All right, well, that's the end of this checkup. Let's move on. Good job, everyone. You just completed the lesson on the present continuous tense. This tense is not easy, but you did a great job and keep watching to learn more. I know English can be difficult, but with practice and effort, you will improve, I promise. See you in the next video. Hi everyone, I'm Esther. In this video, I'm going to introduce the present perfect tense. This tense can be used to talk about an action that happened in the past, but when it happened is not very important or it's unknown. It can also be used to talk about an action that started in the past and continues in the present. We really want to emphasize how long that action has been happening. And finally, we use this tense to talk about a recent action. There's a lot to learn and a lot of important information, so keep watching. Let's talk about one usage of the present perfect tense. This tense can be used to talk about an action that happened in the past, but when it happened is not important or not known. However, this action is important to the conversation right now. Let's take a look at some examples. The first one says, I have been to Canada. What we do here is we start with the subject, I. For I, you, we, and they, we follow with have. After that, we use the past participle of the verb. In this case, the verb is be, and so the past participle is been. I have been to Canada. The next sentence says, my cousins have seen the movie. My cousins is a they, and so again, we follow with have. And the past participle of see is seen. They have seen the movie, or my cousins have seen the movie. The next example says, Chad has gone home. Chad is a he. For he, she, it, we follow with has. Then the past participle gone is for the verb go. Chad has gone home. And finally, my phone has been fixed. My phone is an it. Therefore, I use has. And then I need the past participle of be, been. My phone has been fixed. Let's move on to the next usage. The present perfect tense is also used to describe an action that started in the past and continues in the present. For and since are common expressions used with the present perfect tense. Let's take a look at these examples. I have worked there since 2002. You'll notice we start with the subject. If it's I, you, or we have. Then the past participle of the verb, in this case, worked. What you'll notice here is that we also have since 2002. This shows when the action started. So with the expression since, you need to use a specific point in time. The next example does the same thing. You have had a car since last year. Again, we use since, so we have a specific point in time, last year. Take a look at the next example. Anna has liked him for weeks. In this case, the subject is Anna, which is a she, and so we use has. Then the past participle liked. However, at the end of this sentence, we see 4 weeks, not since weeks. When we use for, we talk about the duration. We explain how long this action has been true. And finally, we have eaten lunch here for 3 months. Again, the sentence ends with for 3 months, so we show the duration. Let's move on to the next usage. In addition, the present perfect tense can be used to describe an action that recently stopped. Let's take a look at some examples. I have just been to the doctor. So just like for all the other usages, we start with the subject, have or has, and the past participle. But you'll notice here I use the word just between have and the verb. I have just been to the doctor. This shows that it happened very recently. The next example says, James has just seen his new baby. Again, just goes in between have or has and the verb. Take a look at the next example. It says, she has already been to China. Already is another word you can use to show that this action recently happened. However, already can also be moved to the end of the sentence. So it's perfectly fine to say, she has been to China already. And in the last example, we have recently visited Tom. Again, you can put this word between have or has and the verb, or you can also put it at the end of the sentence. We have visited Tom recently. Let's move on. Let's take a look at the negative form of the present perfect tense. Here are some examples. The first one says, I have not been to Europe. What you'll notice in the first sentence is that we simply put a not between have and been. I have not been to Europe. You can also use a contraction and say, I haven't been to Europe. The next sentence says, it has not rained for 3 months. Again, we put the not between the has and the verb. It has not rained for 3 months. Here, we have a time expression to show the duration. The next example says, Teddy hasn't driven for 2 years. We use the contraction here for has and not, hasn't. And then we use the time expression for 2 years at the end of the sentence. And finally, the last sentence says, my sons haven't played soccer since 2010. We see another contraction here for have not, haven't. My sons haven't played soccer since 2010. This time expression uses since, and so we mention a specific point in time. Let's move on. Now, let's take a look at the have or has question form for the present perfect tense. Take a look at the board. The first sentence says, Mike has eaten lunch. That is a statement. Now, to turn it into a question, it's quite easy. All you have to do is put has at the beginning. Then you follow with the subject and then the past participle. You'll notice that the placement of the past participle doesn't change. We've simply changed the order of the first 2 words. Has Mike eaten lunch? Has Mike eaten lunch? And you can answer by saying, yes, he has, or no, he hasn't. The next sentence says, they have watched the video. This is a statement. If we want to turn it into a question, again, we change the order of the first 2 words. Have they? And the past participle verb stays in the same place. Have they watched the video? Have they watched the video? You can answer this question by saying, yes, they have, or no, they haven't. Good job, guys. Let's move on. Now, I'll briefly introduce how to ask WH questions in the present perfect tense. Take a look at the board. I have where, what, who, and how. These go at the beginning of the question. Let's take a look at the first example. Where has Tim been? You'll notice we follow the WH word with has or have. In this case, I use has because the subject is Tim, and Tim is a he. And then we followed that with the past participle of the verb. Where has Tim been? And I can answer by saying Tim has been home, or Tim has been on vacation, something like that. The next question says, what countries have you visited? I can answer by saying, I have visited China, or I have visited Mexico. You can also use the contraction I've visited China. The next question says, who has she talked to? You can answer by saying, she has talked to her mom, or she has talked to her teacher. The next question says, how long have you been married? I've been married for 3 years. That's one answer that you can give. Great job, everybody. Let's move on. For this checkup, we'll take a look at the present perfect tense, which describes an action that happened at an unknown or indefinite time in the past. Let's look at the first sentence. She blank read that book. The subject in this sentence is she. For he, she, it, in this tense, we say has. She has. Now, take a look at the verb. It looks like read, but remember, we need to use the past participle of the verb, so it's actually read. Read and read are spelled the same. She has read that book. The second sentence says, they blank visit China. Visit is the verb that you want to use here. For I, you, we, and they, we use have, not has. They have. Now, what's the past participle of visit? The answer is visited. They have visited China. Next, we blank see that concert. Again, for I, you, we, and they, we use have. We have. Now, the past participle of see is seen. We have seen that concert. Now, let's look for the mistake in the next sentence. Rick have been to Cuba. Take a look at the subject. Rick. Rick is a he. So, instead of have, we need to change this to has. Rick has been to Cuba. Sally and I hasn't finished work. The subject in this sentence is Sally and I. The pronoun for that is we. We hasn't finished work? That still sounds weird, right? We have to change this to have not, or the contraction haven't. And finally, I did go to the doctor. Now this sentence makes sense, but it's not the present perfect tense. We have to change it. Remember, we use have for the subject I. But we're not done. What is the past participle of go? It is gone. I have gone to the doctor. Great job. Let's move on to the next checkup. In this checkup, we'll talk about the present perfect tense and how it can be used to describe an action that started in the past and is still true today. The first sentence says, I blank known Carly since 1994. The subject is I, and we already have the past participle of the verb know, which is known. What are we missing? The correct answer is have. For I, you, we, and they, we use have after the subject. The next sentence says, he has been here blank 2 p.m. Now, the first part is all there. He has been. However, remember that for the present perfect tense, we use for or since to talk about how long that action has been true. In this case, we use since because 2 p.m. is a specific period in time. Next, it says she blank liked Tom since June. The subject is she, and we have the past participle of the verb like, which is liked. What are we missing? Again, we need have or has. Because the subject is she, can you figure out which one you need? The correct answer is has. She has liked Tom since June. Now, I want you to find the mistake in the next sentence. I have worked here 6 months ago. Can you find the mistake here? I have worked. That's correct. However, in the present perfect tense, we don't use ago. This is talking about more the past. We want to talk about since or for instead. Now, 6 months is not a specific time, so we don't use since. Instead, we talk about the duration, so we need for. We'll say, I have worked here for 6 months. Let's take a look at the next sentence. Jen have a cold for 2 weeks. At first glance, this doesn't seem that wrong, but remember, Jen is a she, so we need has. Jen has. But wait a minute, Jen has have a cold? That's not right either. We need the past participle of have. What is the past participle? The correct answer is had. Jen has had a cold for 2 weeks. And finally, we haven't went home since Friday. This one is a little tricky. The subject is we. We have not. That's correct. The contraction is haven't. We haven't. Now, the problem is we have this verb went. That's in the past simple tense. We need the past participle of go. The correct answer is gone. We haven't gone home since Friday. Good job, guys. Let's move on to the next checkup. In this checkup, we'll take a look at the present perfect tense and how it is used to describe an action that finished recently. We'll be focusing on the words just, already, and recently to show this. Let's take a look at the first sentence. She has just blank that book. And we're using the verb read. Remember, we take the subject she, and for he, she, and it, we say has. So that's correct. Now we need the past participle of read, and that is read. She has just read that book. You'll notice I use the word just right before the past participle. Next, it says they have already, and the verb is wake up. If the subject is he, she, or it, we use has. But if the subject is I, you, we, or they, we use have. So that's correct. They have. Also, we have the word already here to show that it happened recently or that it finished recently. Now the verb is wake up. We need the past participle of wake up, and that is woken up. So the answer is they have already woken up. The next sentence says, we have recently blank work, and the verb is finish. We have, that's correct, and we have the word recently to show when the action finished. And now we need to find the past participle of the verb finish. The correct answer is we have recently finished ed work. Now, try to find the mistake in the next sentence. Morty has eaten just. This sounds a little strange, right? That's because just needs to come before the verb. Therefore, the answer is Morty has just eaten. The next sentence says, Karen has recently been sick. Karen is a she, so has is correct. And there we have recently. Now we need the past participle of the verb. Be is our verb and the past participle of be is been. Karen has recently been sick. And finally, I have gone already to the dentist. This is similar to another question we looked at just before. I have gone already to the dentist. The placement of already is a little awkward. So we can say, I have already gone. So we can put already before the verb, I have already gone to the dentist. Or we can put this at the end. I have gone to the dentist already. Both of those are correct. Now, good job. That is the end of the checkup. Let's move on. Excellent job, everyone. You just learned about the present perfect tense. There was a lot to learn, but you did a wonderful job. Keep studying English. I know that it's hard, but you will get better with time, effort, and practice. I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone, welcome to the video. In this video, I will introduce the present perfect continuous English tense. This tense can be used to talk about an action that started in the past and continues in the present. It can also be used to talk about an action that has been happening recently. And finally, it can also be used to talk about an action that recently stopped. There's a lot to learn, so keep watching. You can use the present perfect continuous tense to talk about an action that started in the past and continues in the present. We want to emphasize duration, and you can do that by using for or since in your sentence. Let's take a look at some examples. Charles has been studying English for an hour. Take a look at the subject, Charles. The subject pronoun for Charles is he. And that's why we say has. After that, we add been and then verb ing. In this case, studying. You'll also notice that at the end of the sentence, we have for an hour. That shows how long this action has been happening. When you use for, you emphasize the duration, for an hour. Charles has been studying English for an hour. Let's take a look at the next sentence. Lily has been playing the piano for 2 years. In this case, Lily is a she, and that's why, again, we say has. You'll notice, again, we have been and then verb ing. In this case, playing. At the end of this sentence, we also used for, and then 2 years. So again, we're showing how long this has been happening. The next sentence is a little different. It has been growing since June. So it can be something like a plant. The plant, or it, has been growing since June. Here, we used since, not for. What's the difference? We use a specific point in time with since. We don't say since 2 hours. No, we say when the action started, since June. And finally, Dan and I have been working since 6 a.m. The subject pronoun for Dan and I is we. Therefore, we use have. At the end of this sentence, we have since 6 a.m. Remember that with since, we talk about a specific point in time when the action started. Let's move on. The present perfect continuous can also be used without emphasizing duration. In this case, we mean lately. This action has been happening lately. And so we can use the words lately or recently to explain this. Let's take a look at some examples. You have been missing many classes lately. You'll notice that at the end of this sentence, I use the word lately to describe when this action has been happening. You can also use lately at the beginning of the sentence. For example, lately, you have been missing many classes. The next example says, recently, Toby has been running every day. In this sentence, we used recently at the beginning to show when this action has been happening. You can also use recently at the end of the sentence. Toby has been running every day recently. In this example, the subject is Toby, and so we use has after Toby because Toby is a he. The next example says, lately, Dana has been swimming a lot. Again, we use lately at the beginning of this sentence, but you can also use it at the end. Dana is a she, and so we follow this subject with has. And finally, we've been practicing English together recently. We is the subject of this sentence, and so we use have. Here, we use the contraction we've. We have becomes we've. We've been practicing English together recently. We can put recently at the end, or we can say recently, we've been practicing English together. Let's move on. The present perfect continuous tense can also be used to talk about an action that recently stopped and has a present result. Let's take a look at the examples. I'm tired because I have been running. The second part of the sentence, I have been running, is using the present perfect continuous tense. This is the action that recently stopped. And as a result, I'm tired. This is the present result. What's happening now because of this? I'm tired. The next example says, the street is wet because it has been raining. This is very similar to the first sentence. Here, we know that it has been raining, and this action recently stopped. As a result, in the present, the street is wet. The street is wet right now because of this action. The next example says, you don't understand because you haven't been listening. You'll notice here that we use the negative. Here's the contraction haven't for have not. Because of this action, you haven't been listening. Now, you don't understand. In the last example, we switched the order a little bit. I've been studying all night. There is the present perfect continuous tense. This is the action that stopped recently. And here's the result. Now, I'm exhausted. Great job, everyone. Let's move on. Let's take a look at the negative form of the present perfect continuous tense. Here are some examples. I have not been feeling well these days. At the end of the sentence, we have these days to show that this is an action that's been happening recently. In the negative form, we have to have a not. The not goes after have or has. In this case, the subject is I, so I used have. I have not been feeling well these days. We can also use a contraction haven't for have not. I haven't been feeling well these days. The next sentence says, Sue has not been cooking lately. We have lately at the end of this sentence. We can also put lately at the beginning of this sentence. The important part of this sentence is to put not after has. Why did we use has? Because the subject is Sue, which is a she. For he, she, it, we use has. Again, we can use a contraction hasn't for has not. Sue hasn't been cooking lately. The next sentence says, Jeff hasn't been eating healthy food recently. Again, the recently can be used at the beginning or end of this sentence. We have the contraction hasn't here for you. Hasn't is a contraction for has not. We have has because the subject is Jeff, which is a he. And finally, they haven't been speaking for over a year. In this case, for over a year shows duration. Remember, with for, you show how long something has been happening. In this case, we have a contraction haven't for have not. Great job, everybody. Let's move on. Now, let's take a look at how to form the have or has question for the present perfect continuous tense. The first sentence says, he has been reading for an hour. Now, to turn this into a question, all we have to do is change the order of the first two words. So he has becomes has he. Has he been reading for an hour? You'll notice that the second part of the sentence doesn't change. Has he been reading for an hour? To answer, you can simply say yes, he has, or no, he hasn't. The next sentence says, they have been sleeping since 8 p.m. Again, the second part of the sentence stays the same, and in the beginning, we just switched the first two words. They have becomes have they. Have they been sleeping since 8 p.m.? To answer, you can say yes, they have, or no, they haven't. Great job, everybody. Let's move on. Now, let's take a look at how to form WH questions in the present perfect continuous tense. Here, we have some WH question words. What, where, why, and how. Let's take a look at the first question. What have you been doing lately? I can answer by saying, I have been working, or I have been studying. I can also use the contraction I've been working. I've been studying. The next question says, where have you been traveling? I have been traveling in Europe, or I've been traveling in Europe. Why has he been feeling sad? You can answer by saying, he's been feeling sad. That's the contraction he has. He's been feeling sad because his pet died. Or he has been feeling sad because he broke up with his girlfriend. Something like that. And how has she been doing? How has she been doing? I can say, she's been doing well. She's is a contraction for she has. Great job, everyone. Let's move on. In this checkup, we will talk about the present perfect continuous tense. This tense can be used to describe an event that started in the past and continues in the present. Let's take a look. The first sentence says, he has blank all week, and the verb is sleep. For this tense, what we do is we first look at the subject, he. For he, she, and it, we put has. Then we add been, has been. Finally, we add ing to the end. He has been sleeping all week. The next sentence says, you haven't blank for a year, and the verb is travel. Now, this is the negative form, so you see the contraction haven't. You have not, or you haven't. Again, what we do after that is add been. Then, do you remember what to do? Add ing to the verb. You haven't been traveling for a year. Next, it says they blank working all day. So the verb ing has already been provided for you. Now, take a look at the subject. The subject is they. Should we use have or should we use has? The correct answer is have. Then what do you put? Remember, we put been. They have been working all day. Now, if you want to make this negative, you can say they haven't been working all day. Now, find the mistake in the next sentence. My friends have been watch TV. My friends have been watch TV. What's the mistake? Remember, we need to add ing to the end of the verb. So, we should say, my friends have been watching TV. Next, Sal did talking for 10 minutes. Sal is a he, and talking is already there for you. So what's in the middle of those two words is the mistake. For he, we use has. So we say has been. Sal has been talking for 10 minutes. And finally, he has been to eat for an hour. He has been. That's correct. However, in this sentence, the base form of the verb eat was used. Instead, remember we need ing. This is the correct answer. He has been eating for an hour. All right, good job, and let's move on to the next practice. In this practice, we'll take a look at the present perfect continuous tense and see how it expresses an action that has been happening recently or lately. Let's take a look at the first sentence. She has blank bad lately, and the verb is feel. Remember, for she, we use has. Then, don't forget, we need to have been. She has been. After that, we add ing to the verb. The correct sentence is, she has been feeling bad lately. The next sentence says, we haven't blank much recently, and the verb is cook. This is a negative sentence, so we say we have not, or the contraction haven't. We haven't, don't forget, been, and then verb ing. We haven't been cooking much recently. Finally, we move on. Let's try to find the mistake. We has been riding bikes to school recently. What's the mistake in this sentence? The subject here is we. For I, you, we, and they, we have to say have been, not has been. We have been riding bikes to school recently. And for the last one, Jenny lately hasn't been helping me. The lately is placed wrong in this sentence. We have to say, lately, Jenny hasn't been helping me. Or we can also say, Jenny hasn't been helping me lately. Let's move on to the next checkup. In this checkup, we'll talk about the present perfect continuous tense and how it expresses an action that stopped recently but has a present result. The first sentence says, I blink. That's why I'm so sweaty. The verb here is exercise, and the subject is I. Do we use has or have for the subject I? The correct answer is have. Then we put been and then verb ing. Okay, so the correct answer is I have been exercising. That's why I'm so sweaty. That's the result. The next sentence says, I'm covered in flour because I blank. And the verb is bake. Take a look. I'm covered in flour because. So this first part is the result. I need to show the action that stopped recently in the present perfect continuous tense. Again, the subject is I. So we use have been. Then, all we do is add ing to the end of baking. I have been baking. So again, I'm covered in flour because I have been baking. And we can use the contraction and say, I've been baking. Now, find the mistake in the next sentence. She has think a lot, so she has a headache. Take a look. The result is that she has a headache. So we need to use the present perfect continuous for the first part. She has is correct. What's missing? Don't forget the been. Also, don't forget that we need to add ing to the verb. She has been thinking a lot, so she has a headache. Look at the next sentence and find the mistake. I'm so hungry because I have been diet. The only mistake here is that someone forgot to put the ing at the end of the verb diet. The correct answer is, I'm so hungry because I have been dieting. Great job, everyone. Let's move on. Thank you so much for watching this grammar course on the present tense. Now, I want you to watch the next grammar course on the past tense. I'll see you there. Hi, everyone. In this video, I will introduce the past simple English tense. This grammar tense can help you explain a past general state, action, or habit. There's a lot to learn, and it's a very important tense, so keep watching. In this video, I will talk about the be verb in the past simple tense. The be verb in the past simple tense can be used to describe a past general state. We use the be verbs was and were in this tense. Take a look at the examples. I was scared. James, or he, was a teacher. She was sad. My dog was hungry. My dog can be it. So, for I, he, she, it, we use the past tense be verb was. However, for you, we, and they, we use were. You were a good student. Your parents, or they, were at the park. And we were at home for 2 hours. In this last sentence, you see that the duration is emphasized. Great job! Let's move on. Now, I will talk about regular verbs in the past simple tense. Take a look at these examples. Liam played a game. Liam is a he, but really it doesn't matter for regular verbs in the past simple tense because no matter what the subject is, all we have to do is add d or ed to the end of the verb. Here, the verb is play, so I added ed. Liam played a game. The car, or it, needed gas. The verb here is need. For the past simple tense, I added ed. We watched a movie. Again, an ed at the end of watch. You exercised for an hour. In this case, the verb is exercise. I only need to add a d to make it the past tense. And finally, they usually worked after school. The verb is work, and I added an ed to make it in the past tense. The word usually shows that this was a habit. Remember, the past simple tense can be used to show past habits. Let's move on. Now, I'll talk about irregular verbs in the past simple tense. Remember, for regular verbs, we only add d or ed to make a verb into the past tense. However, for irregular verbs, we have to change the verb in a different way. Let's take a look at some examples. I ate with my friend. The verb here is ate. Ate is the past simple tense of eat. The next example says Nara wrote a story. The verb is write. And because it's irregular, to change it into the past tense, we change the verb to wrote. You often came home late. The verb here is come, and it's been changed to came. You'll notice that we had the word often to show a habit. We bought a camera. The verb here is buy, and it's been changed to bought to show the past simple tense. And finally, My parents sent me money for a year. Here, the verb sent is the past tense of send. Here, we also see for a year. This shows duration. Let's move on. Now, I will talk about the negative form for the be verb in the past simple tense. Here are some examples. The first one says, I was not hungry. For the past simple tense, the negative be verb, if the subject is I, he, she, or it, we say was not. For example, I was not, or she was not, or the contraction wasn't. I wasn't, she wasn't. So let's look again. I was not hungry. She wasn't home today. Now, if the subject is you, we, or they, we say were not, or the contraction weren't. The children, or they, were not quiet. The children were not quiet. And then the dog, or it, was not, or wasn't, playful. Let's move on. Now, let's talk about how to form the negative in the past simple tense for non-be verbs, regular or irregular. Here are some examples. I did not like him. What we do for non-be verbs is simply put did not after the subject. And you'll notice that for the verb, we don't make any changes. We keep the base verb. He didn't catch the ball. Again, it's he did not, but here we used a contraction. He didn't catch the ball. They didn't dance. Again, here's the contraction for did not. And you'll notice that for the verb, we didn't change it at all. Here's an irregular verb and here's a regular verb. We keep them in the base form. And finally, we didn't think about that. Again, we simply say did not or didn't. Let's move on. Now, I will introduce two ways to form questions for the past simple tense. Take a look at the first example. He was angry. In this first sentence, we see the be verb was. It's quite easy. All you have to do to turn this into a question is switch the order of the first two words. Was he angry? You can answer by saying yes, he was, or no, he wasn't. The next sentence also has a be verb. They were comfortable. So again, switch the first two words. Were they comfortable? The answers can be yes, they were, or no, they weren't. However, look at the third sentence. Sam lived here. There is no be verb in this sentence. Instead, we see the action verb lived. So what we do is, no matter what the subject, we start the question with did. Did Sam live here? You'll notice that the verb no longer is in the past tense. We use the base form of the verb. Did Sam live here? You can say yes, he did, or no, he didn't. The last sentence is similar. They won the contest last year. The verb here is won. That's not a be verb. So again, we start the question with did. And then the subject, they. We use the base form of the verb, and that's win. Did they win the contest last year? You can say yes, they did, or no, they didn't. Let's move on. Now, I'll introduce how to create and answer WH questions in the past simple tense. Take a look at the board. We have some WH words here. What, when, where, and why. You'll notice that after each WH word comes the word did. What did? When did? Where did? And why did? What comes after that? The subject, and then the base form of the verb. So, let's take a look. What did you do last night? What did you do last night? I can answer by saying something like, I watched a movie. or I read a book. You'll notice that the answer is in the past simple tense. When did you get home last night? I got home at 10 p.m. Where did they eat lunch? They ate lunch at home. Again, ate is the past tense of eat. Answer in the past simple tense. And finally, why did the company hire him? The company hired him because he's a hard worker. Let's move on. In this first checkup, we'll take a look at practice questions using the be verb in the past simple tense. Remember, the be verbs in the past simple tense are was or were. Let's take a look at the first sentence. He blank at work earlier. The subject here is we. So, do we use was or were? The correct answer is was. He was at work earlier. The next sentence says, we blank very happy yesterday. If the subject is we, remember the be verb is were. We were very happy yesterday. Next, my parents or they blank worried about me. If it's they, remember we have to say were. My parents were worried about me. If I want to use the negative, I can also say my parents weren't worried about me. And that's possible. Now, I want you to find the mistake in the next sentence. We wasn't good students. We wasn't good students. Can you figure out what's wrong? The subject here is we, so we don't say was not. We need to say were not, or the contraction weren't. We weren't good students is the correct answer. The next one says, were she a teacher? Now this is a question, so the be verb comes at the beginning. That's correct. But the subject here is she. Therefore, we need to start with was. Was she a teacher? And finally, they wasn't at school. The subject is they. So the answer is they weren't at school. You can use the contraction weren't or were not. Let's move on to the next checkup. Now, let's practice regular verbs in the past simple tense. Take a look at the first sentence. He blank at home. The verb is study. Remember, when changing a regular verb into the past tense, we add d or ed to the end of the verb. However, there's a separate rule for words that end in y, such as study. We drop the y and we add ied. So the correct answer is he studied at home. The next sentence says, we blank pencils. We want to use the negative because it says not use. Remember, for the negative, we always use did not, no matter what the subject. You can also use the contraction didn't. Now, what do we do to the verb? We keep it as is. We do not change it. We didn't or we did not use pencils. The next sentence says, his friends or they walk to the gym. What's the past tense of walk? We simply have to add ed because it's a regular verb. His friends walked to the gym. Now, find the mistake in the next sentence. She didn't likes math. Didn't is correct. However, remember, we keep the verb as is in the base form. So, we don't say likes, we say like. She didn't like math. The next sentence says, did it rain this morning? Now this is a question. In a question, it's right to start the sentence with did. Did it rain? Do you notice the mistake? Remember, we do not use the past tense form in the question. We use the base form of the verb. Did it rain this morning? And finally, they not play the piano. The verb is an action verb, so we need a did in front of the not. They did not play the piano. Let's move on to the next checkup. Now, I'll talk about irregular verbs in the past simple tense. Take a look at the first sentence. He blinked to school, and the verb is run. Run is an irregular verb, so the past tense form is ran. He ran to school. The next sentence says, we blink flowers. We want to use the negative because here it says not grow. Remember, no matter what the subject, in the negative form, we say did not or didn't. Then we keep the verb in its base form. We did not grow or we didn't grow flowers. The next sentence says, where blank you teach last year. This is a question. Again, all we need to put is did. Where did you teach last year? It doesn't matter what the subject is. We always go with did. Next, try to find the mistake in the next sentence. He didn't sold newspapers. Remember, in the negative, didn't is correct for whatever subject there is. However, we need to keep the verb in its base form. So, the correct answer is he didn't sell newspapers. The next sentence says, did she sing a song? You'll notice it's a similar problem here. Sang is the irregular past tense form of sing. But in a question, if it starts with did, we use the base form. Did she sing a song? And finally, we taked it home. Does that sound right? Taked is not correct. The past tense of taked is took. We took it home. Great job, everyone. Let's move on. Wow, we learned a lot in this video. Keep studying and reviewing the past simple tense. It's an essential tense that will help you talk about the past. Keep studying English, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Hi everybody, I'm Esther. In this video, I will introduce the past continuous tense. This tense can be used to describe an action that was ongoing in the past. It can also be used to describe two actions happening at the same time in the past. There's a lot to learn, so let's get started. Let's take a look at the first usage of the past continuous tense. This tense can be used to describe an action that was ongoing in the past. Let's take a look at these examples. I was walking in the park in the evening. So first, we start with the subject, I. For I, he, she, and it, we follow with was. I was. And then we add an ing to the end of the verb. I was walking. Now take a look at the whole sentence. I was walking in the park in the evening. You can see that this was an ongoing action and it happened in the past. Let's look at the next example. She was living here last year. Here, the subject is she, so again, we use was and then verb ing. Here, we have another expression that shows that this action was happening in the past. The dog, or it, was eating dinner 5 minutes ago. The subject here is the dog, which can be replaced by the pronoun it, and so we follow with was. And finally, Andy and Jim we can replace this with they. For you, we, and they, we use were. They were, or Andy and Jim were, working at 9 p.m. Let's move on. The past continuous tense is also used to describe an ongoing action in the past that was interrupted by another action. This interrupting action is used in the past simple tense with the word when. Let's take a look at this example. I was playing cards when you called. Again, we start with the subject, was or were, and then verb ing. So this is the action that was ongoing in the past. I was playing cards. The interrupting action in this sentence is you called. You'll notice I used the word when to show the interrupting action, and I used it in the past simple tense, called. Let's take a look at the next sentence. The cat, or it, was eating when Eric came home. Again, the action in progress is the cat was eating. And Eric came home. You'll notice the past simple tense. This is the interrupting action used with the word when. We were sleeping when Anne arrived. Again, we have the ongoing action in the past. The subject here is we, and so we used were. And then verb ing. When Anne arrived is the interrupting action. And finally, Alicia and I, or we, were walking when we saw Mark. When we saw Mark is the interrupting action that interrupted the ongoing Alicia and I were walking. It's also important to note that we can also switch the order of the sentence around and say, when you called, I was playing cards. Or when Eric came home, the cat was eating. Let's move on. Another usage for the past continuous tense is to talk about two actions that were happening at the same time in the past. We use the past continuous tense for both actions with the word while. Let's take a look at some examples. The first sentence says, while I was playing soccer, she was watching me. You'll notice that both actions are in the past continuous tense. I was playing soccer and she was watching me. The word while at the beginning shows that these actions were happening at the same time. While you were reading, I was preparing dinner. Again, both actions are expressed in the past continuous tense. The word while shows that they were happening at the same time. While her husband, or he, was driving, she was taking pictures. Both actions are in the past continuous tense. And finally, while we were eating, the music was playing. Both actions were happening at the same time. Now, you'll notice that in my examples, the word while comes at the beginning. However, it's important to note that you can move the word while around in several ways. For example, instead of saying this, while I was playing soccer, she was watching me, I can move while to the middle of the sentence. I was playing soccer while she was watching me. I can put the while between the two actions. Or I can also change the sentence around and say, while she was watching me, I was playing soccer. So it doesn't matter which action comes first with the while if you put it in the beginning. Let's move on. Now, let's talk about the negative form of the past continuous tense. Here are some examples. She was not reading last night. The subject is she, and so we use was. However, before the verb ing, we add not. She was not reading last night. I can use a contraction and say she wasn't reading last night. We were not listening to music this morning. In this case, the subject is we, and so we use were. Again, not comes before the verb ing. We were not listening to music this morning. Again, I can use a contraction and say, we weren't listening to music this morning. And the next one says, he wasn't watching TV when his dad came home. In this example, the contraction is already there for you. He wasn't watching TV. You'll notice the word when. Remember, when plus a past simple tense verb shows an interrupting action. So, when his dad came home, he wasn't watching TV. He was doing something else. And finally, they weren't talking while the game was playing. The word while is in this sentence. Remember, that shows two past ongoing actions happening at the same time. So, while the game was playing, they weren't talking. They were doing something else. Let's move on. Now, let's talk about how to form be verb questions for the past continuous tense. Take a look at the first statement. It says, it was raining this morning. In order to turn this into a question, it's quite easy. All we have to do is change the order of the first two words. Instead of it was, I now say was it to make it a question. You'll notice that the rest of the words stay in the same place. Was it raining this morning? You can answer by saying yes, it was, or no, it wasn't. The next statement says, they were living there when the fire happened. To turn this into a be question, again, we just switch the order of the first two words. Instead of they were, we say were they. And again, the rest of the words can stay in the same place. Were they living there when the fire happened? And you can answer by saying yes, they were, or no, they weren't. Let's continue on. Now, I'll go into how to make WH questions for the past continuous tense. You'll notice that the examples here all begin with some WH words. For example, what, where, why, and who. Let's take a look at the first question. What were they doing last night? The subject of this sentence is they. So what you do is, after the WH word, you put the proper be verb. In this case, were. What were they doing last night? You'll notice that after the subject comes the verb ing. What were they doing last night? I can answer by saying they were playing games or they were reading a book. The next question says, where was he working last week? In this case, the subject is he, and so the be verb to use is was. Where was he working last week? I can say he was working in Canada. Why was she crying when she finished the book? In this case, the subject is she, and so I put was after why. Why was she crying when she finished the book? I can say she was crying because the ending was sad. And finally, who were the children staying with while their mom was working? In this case, the children is a they, so we follow who with were. Who were they or who were the children staying with while their mom was working? To answer, I can say the children or they were staying with their dad. Let's move on. In this section, let's do a checkup for the past continuous tense. Take a look at the first sentence. Last night, they were blank at school. I want you to try to fill in the blank with the negative for the verb stay, not stay. What do you think it is? Remember, for the negative of the past continuous, all you have to do is put not and then verb ing after the be verb. They were not staying at school. Last night, they were not staying at school. The next sentence says, 2 days ago, you blank soccer. Again, try the negative for the verb play. 2 days ago, blank, not play soccer. In this case, the first thing that's missing is the be verb. If the subject is you, can you think of which be verb needs to be put in there? The correct answer is were. And then we say not. What happens after that? Remember, verb ing. So, you were not playing. 2 days ago, you were not playing soccer. You can also use a contraction and say you weren't playing soccer. Now, try to find the mistake in the next sentence. Yesterday, she were reading at home. The subject of this sentence is she. So, the be verb to use is not were, it's was. Yesterday, she was reading at home. In the next sentence, it says tomorrow they were seeing their friends. They and were, that's correct. And we have the verb ing. So what's the mistake? Remember, the past continuous is for the past. Tomorrow is not the past. So instead, we need to put a word that shows the past. For example, I can say yesterday. Yesterday, they were seeing their friends. Let's move on. Now, let's start a checkup of the when usage of the past continuous tense. Take a look at the first example. It says Andrea and John blink when they blank hurt. Remember, when shows an interrupting action. It needs to be used with the past simple tense. So, let's first look at the second blank. When they blank hurt. What's the past tense of the verb get? The answer is got. Now, let's take a look at the action that was in progress in the past. Andrea and John, or they, well, what comes after they? Were. Andrea and John were. Then remember, we need to add ing to the verb. They were skiing, or Andrea and John were skiing when they got hurt. The next example says, it blank not raining when the game blank. And I want you to use the verb start for the second blank. Take a look. When the game blank. What's the past tense of start? Started. Now, let's look at the first part of the sentence. The subject is it. So, what be verb do we use for it? Was. It was not raining when the game started. Now, find the mistake in the next sentence. I wasn't study at the library yesterday. The subject here is I, and so the be verb was is correct. Here, there's a contraction, I wasn't, for I was not. Now, the problem is with the verb. Remember, we need to put ing at the end of the verb. I wasn't studying at the library yesterday. And finally, we did meet our friends last weekend. That sounds right, but remember, we're doing the past continuous tense. Take a look again. The subject is we. We need a be verb. Were. Then what happens? Remember, we need to add an ing to the end of the verb. So we take out did and say, we were meeting our friends last weekend. Let's move on. Now, for this checkup, we'll look at the while usage of the past continuous tense. Take a look at the first example. While I blink, someone blink my bike. When we use while in the past continuous tense, we're showing that two actions happened at the same time in the past, or they were happening at the same time in the past. So, we need to use the past continuous for both actions. While I blank, I want you to use shop in the first blank. Remember, the subject here is I, so I need to use the be verb was. then verb ing. While I was shopping, now someone can be a he or she. Therefore, again, we need to use was. And then the verb ing of steal. While I was shopping, someone was stealing my bike. The next sentence says, while he blank, I want you to use the verb cook. The subject is he, and so I need to use was cooking. While he was cooking, his girlfriend was cleaning. Did you get that? Let's move on. Try to find the mistake in the next sentence. Jane was looking for us while we get off the plane. The first part of this sentence is correct. Jane was looking. Now, the second part of the sentence, notice it's not in the past continuous tense, while we get off the plane. So, what we need to do is say, were getting. Jane was looking for us while we were getting off the plane. The next sentence says, I was watching TV while my wife sleep. Again, this part of the sentence did not use the past continuous tense. My wife is a she, and so I need to say was sleeping. I was watching TV while my wife was sleeping. Great job, everyone. Let's move on. Good job, everybody, in learning the past continuous tense. This tense can be a little difficult and a little tricky, especially when it comes to the when and while usage. It'll take some practice to really master it, but I know you can do it. Keep studying English, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everybody, I'm Esther. In this video, I will introduce the past perfect tense. This tense is used to describe an action that took place at a specific time in the past. This tense can be a little tricky, but don't worry, I will guide you through it. There's so much to learn, and it's a very important tense, so keep watching. Let's take a look at the first usage of the past perfect tense. This tense can be used to describe an action in the past that happened before another action in the past. Here are some examples. I had visited China before I moved there. No matter what the subject, you follow with had, so that's easy. I had, Steve had, the plane had, and we had. Then we follow with the past participle of the verb. In this case, it's visited. I had visited China. Now you'll notice that the second verb is in the past simple tense. I moved there. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Steve had bought the book. Again, subject, had, and past participle. In this case, the verb is buy. Steve had bought the book before he read it. Again, we have the simple tense of read, which is read. And finally, the plane had left by the time I got to the airport. Again, the first part of this sentence is in the past perfect tense. The plane had left. This is the past participle of leave. The second verb says I got to the airport. Got is the past tense of get. Now, what these three sentences have in common is that you'll see before or by the time. They all mean the same thing. The verb that is in the past perfect tense happened first. The verb that's in the past simple tense happened after. So again, for the first example, before I moved there, that happened later. Before that, I had already visited China. Do you understand how that works? Let's take a look at the last example. When they arrived, we had already started the game. So maybe they were late or something had happened. But when they arrived, this is the past simple tense. So this happened second. We had already started the game. This action had already started. It started before this action. Let's move on. Earlier, I mentioned that the past perfect tense can be used to describe an action that happened in the past before another action in the past. We can do the same thing, but also emphasize the duration, how long that first action happened. We do this by using for and a duration. Let's take a look. I had owned my computer for 2 months before it broke. This is very similar to the first usage. I, had, and the past participle of the verb. This part shows the action that happened earlier in the past. The second part, it broke. The past simple tense verb shows the action in the past that happened later than the first action. However, you'll notice that this sentence has a duration for 2 months. I had owned my computer for 2 months before it broke. All I'm doing here is showing how long the first action had been true. Let's take a look at the next example. Jim had been lonely for a long time until he got a puppy. Again, we have subject, had, past participle. And then we have the past simple. He got a puppy. All we're doing here is emphasizing how long the first action had been true. He had been lonely for a long time. That is until the later action. He got a puppy. And finally, she and I had been friends for many years before she became my wife. The first part of the sentence is the past perfect. It happened before she became my wife. But I want to explain how long that had been true. For many years. Let's move on. Now, I'll introduce how to form the negative in the past perfect tense. Take a look at the board. The first sentence says, I had not eaten at the restaurant before I went yesterday. Again, we have the past perfect tense here and the past simple tense here. This one is the action that happened earlier in the past, and this one over here is the action that happened later in the past. However, because this is the negative, what I'm going to do is add a not between the had and the past participle of the verb. So I say, I had not eaten, or I can use the contraction and say, I hadn't eaten at the restaurant before I went yesterday. The next sentence is very similar. She had not been to the circus before she went last week. Here's the action that happened earlier in the past, and here's the action that happened later in the past. However, again, because it's negative, I put a not between had and the past participle of the verb. Also, I can use the contraction and say she hadn't been to the circus. The next sentence says, the cat hadn't chased the bird for very long before it flew away. Remember, we can show duration or how long the first action was true by using for and a duration. Because this is the negative form, again, I use had not after the subject and before the past participle of the verb. In this case, the contraction hadn't is already there for you. We hadn't known each other for 3 months before we married. That's a pretty short time. It shows the duration by saying for, how long? 3 months. Let's move on. Now, let's take a look at questions using had in the past perfect tense. Take a look at the first sentence. It says, she had eaten lunch by noon. Now, to turn this into a question, it's quite easy. All you have to do is change the order of the first 2 words. So instead of she had, we say had she. Had she eaten lunch by noon? You can say yes, she had, or no, she hadn't. The next sentence says, it had rained before they left. Again, simply switch the order of the first two words. Instead of it had, say had it to make a question. Had it rained before they left? To reply, you can say yes, it had, or no, it hadn't. Let's move on. Now, I'll go into how to form WH questions in the past perfect tense. Let's take a look. Here, we see at the beginning of each question a WH word. Where, who, what, and how. Let's take a look at the first question. Where had he traveled before? You'll notice that after each WH word, we have had. And then the subject, and then the past participle of the verb. Where had he traveled before? The next question says, who had she talked to before? This is the same thing. The WH word, had she, and then the past participle. You'll notice here that we have the word before, but we didn't write a specific point in time. If you see that, it simply means before now. The next question says, what had he eaten before lunch? Again, we follow the same formula. However, here it says lunch for you. The last one says, how long had she known him before she dated him? Again, how long, had, subject, and then the past participle. Let's take a look at how to answer these questions. Where had he traveled before? He had traveled to Europe is one possible answer. Who had she talked to before? Here, I can say she had talked to her brother. What had he eaten before lunch? He had eaten sushi before lunch. And finally, how long had she known him before she dated him? She had known him for 3 years. That is one possible answer. Let's move on. Now, let's take a look at some practice exercises for the basic usage of the past perfect tense. Take a look at the first sentence. I blank for 6 hours before I had a break. The verb here is work. Remember, we need to say I had no matter what the subject is. Say had. I had, and then you take the past participle of the verb. In this case, we would say worked. I had worked for 6 hours before I had a break. For the next sentence, I want you to try the negative form. We blank TV before we listened to the radio. Remember, for the negative form, we say had not, or we use the contraction hadn't. We hadn't, and then we need the past participle. We hadn't watched TV before we listened to the radio. Now, find the mistake in the next sentence. Reggie hadn't been to Mexico before he went to Peru. Well, we have the subject here, and for the negative, hadn't is correct. However, we need the past participle of the verb be. So the correct answer is, Reggie hadn't been to Mexico before he went to Peru. And finally, Sally and Jan, or they, had do their job. Remember, we need the past participle. We don't say do, we say done. Sally and Jan had done their job before they watched TV. Let's move on. In this checkup, we'll take a look at some practice exercises for the past perfect tense that describes how long. Let's take a look at the first sentence. You blank at the park for 3 hours before you came home. Remember, we start with the subject and then had. So I'm going to add that here. Then we need the past participle of the verb be, and that is been. You had been at the park for 3 hours before you came home. The next sentence says, they blank for 6 hours before they took a break. Again, no matter what the subject, we have had and then the past participle. So the answer is, they had studied for 6 hours before they took a break. Now, find the mistake in the next sentence. It's a little bit longer, so it might take you a while. They had been known each other for 10 years before they had their first fight. Can you find the mistake? Well, we have the subject and had, but check this out. There are 2 past participles here. We need to get rid of one of them. We can take out this verb and say, they had known each other for 10 years before they had their first fight. The next sentence says, I have played soccer for many years before I scored my first goal. This sentence doesn't look wrong at first, but remember, in the past perfect tense, we need to say had. I had played soccer for many years before I scored my first goal. Good job, everybody. Let's move on. Great job, everyone. Now you have a better understanding of the past perfect tense. I know it can be a little difficult, but keep studying and keep practicing and you will get better. I know studying English is not easy, but with time and effort, I know you'll master it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everybody, I'm Esther. In this video, I will introduce the past perfect continuous tense. It's a great tense that helps you express an ongoing action in the past, continuing up to another point in the past. There's a lot to learn, so keep watching. One usage of the past perfect continuous tense is to talk about an ongoing action in the past that continued up to another point in the past. You can use for and a duration to talk about how long that action was in progress. Here are some examples. I had been waiting for the bus for 2 hours before it arrived. You'll notice that at the beginning, it doesn't matter what the subject is, we follow with had been. For example, I had been, Chuck had been, and Tom and Kim had been. And then we follow with the verb ing, waiting. I had been waiting. Now this is the ongoing action that happened first. Again, 4 and 2 hours shows the duration. The second part says it arrived. This verb is in the past simple tense. Therefore, that is the second action. It's the action that this first action happened until this action happened. So again, I had been waiting for the bus happened first, and then it happened until the bus arrived. Chuck had been cooking. Again, that part's easy. No matter what the subject, we say had been and then verb ing. Again, I can show how long Chuck had been cooking by saying for an hour, showing the duration. And then I finish by saying before he finished. He had been cooking up to this point in the past. Finally, Tom and Kim had been walking. This part should be familiar to you by now. For an hour. Again, that shows duration before they rested. So they had been walking for an hour before they took a break, before they rested. Let's move on. The past perfect continuous tense is also used to express cause and effect in the past. The verb that's in the past perfect continuous tense shows the cause, why something happened. We can use because or so to show the cause and effect. Here, I'll explain. Jason was tired because he had been jogging. The first part of the sentence is in the past tense. Jason was tired. However, we see why. Well, because he had been jogging. The second part of this sentence is in the past perfect continuous tense. He had been, remember, no matter what the subject, we follow with had been, and jogging, verb ing. He had been jogging. This shows why Jason was tired. The next sentence says the pavement, or it, was wet because it had been raining. Similar to the first sentence, it had been raining shows the cause. Why was the pavement wet? The pavement was wet because it had been raining. In this sentence, we see a little difference. The children had been playing. Again, this is the past perfect continuous tense. Had been playing. The second part says the room was a mess. So here, instead of because, like the first two sentences, I used so. So the order has been changed, but the meaning is the same. This, the children had been playing, is why the room was a mess. This is the cause, and this is the effect. Let's move on. Now, let's go into the negative form of the past perfect continuous tense. Here are some examples. I had not been working for a day before I quit. So, no matter what the subject, I, you, she, or it, just like in the affirmative, we say had. But after the had, in the negative form, we add not. Had not, had not. Or you can use the contraction hadn't, which is a combination of had and not together. I had not been working. The rest of the sentence is the same. Been, verb ing. I had not been working for a day before I quit. The next sentence says, you had not been cutting onions for long before you cried. Again, the not goes between had and been. She hadn't been studying for long when she fell asleep. Here we have the contraction. And finally, it hadn't been snowing for long when it stopped. Again, we have the contraction for had not here. You'll notice that in the first two sentences, I used before, and in the last two, I used when. Either one can be used to show when the first action stopped. Let's move on. Now, let's go into how to form basic questions in the past perfect continuous tense. Here is the first example. He had been driving all day before he arrived. Now, to turn this into a question, all we have to do is change the order of the first two words. Instead of he had, now I can say had he in order to form a question. Had he been driving all day before he arrived? The next sentence says the dog had been barking because it was scared. In this case, the subject is the dog. And then we follow with had. To turn this into a question, again, we switch the order. Had the dog been barking because it was scared? You'll notice that in the question, the rest of the words stay in the same place. Now, in the first question, we're asking how long an action happened or how long it was ongoing in the past. And in this question, we ask about cause and effect. Let's move on. Now, I'll introduce how to form WH questions in the past perfect continuous tense. Take a look at these examples. You'll notice that they all start with a WH word. Why, where, what, and who. You might also have noticed that after we have had. Why had, where had, what had, and who had. In the first question, after that comes the subject. Why had you? And then been, verb ing. And that's the same pattern we follow for all of these sentences. So, why had you been studying so much? I can answer by saying, I had been studying so much because I have a test. Where had you been traveling before you came here? I can say, I had been traveling through Asia. What had they been playing before they played soccer? I can answer, they had been playing baseball. And finally, who had she been talking to before she left home? I can answer, she had been talking to her boyfriend. Let's move on. Let's start a checkup for the past perfect continuous tense. Take a look at the first sentence. It says, they blank for a long time before they went home. Try to fill in the blank with the verb work in this tense. Remember, no matter what the subject, we follow the subject with had been. So we say, they had been. What happens to the verb? Remember, we add ing. So the sentence is, they had been working for a long time before they went home. Now, take a look at the second sentence. I want you to use the negative. I blink TV for a year before I started again. Remember, the negative form for this tense starts with the subject and then had not been. Or I can use the contraction hadn't. I hadn't been, and then again, verb ing. I hadn't been watching TV for a year before I started again. Now, try to find the mistake in this next sentence. Gina and I hadn't been due any work before we started. What's the error? You'll notice that the verb does not have an ing. To make this sentence correct, we must say, Gina and I hadn't been doing any work before we started. Now, find the mistake here. He had been watching YouTube because he had some free time. He had, that's correct, but we need to change be to been. And watching is correct. So, he had been watching YouTube because he had some free time. Let's move on. Now, let's move on to another checkup of the past perfect continuous tense. Take a look at the first example. It says the company blank employees because they worked hard. Use the verb promote in the past perfect continuous tense. Remember, no matter what the subject, we follow with had been. So we say the company had been and then verb ing. So promoting. The company had been promoting employees because they worked hard. The next example says, I blank your emails for a while because they went to the spam folder. Here, try to use the negative form with the verb get. Remember, in the negative form, we say had not been getting, or the contraction hadn't been getting. I hadn't been getting your emails for a while because they went to the spam folder. Now, look for the mistake in the next sentence. I had been work a lot because I needed the money. What's the mistake? Remember, we need to add ing to the verb. I had been working a lot because I needed the money. The last sentence says, he has been smoking because he was stressed. Can you find the mistake? Remember, we're practicing the past perfect continuous. In this case, we need had after the subject, not has. Great job, everyone. Let's move on. Thank you so much for watching this grammar course on the past tense. Now, if you haven't had a chance to check out my grammar course on the present tense or the future tense, make sure you do that now. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Hi everyone, I'm Esther. In this video, I will introduce the future simple tense using will and be going to. This is a very important tense that will help you express future actions and plans. There's a lot to learn, so let's get started. The future simple tense can be used to express a future action. Let's take a look at some examples. I'm cold. Well, that's right now. I will close the window. We start with the subject, will, and then the base verb. I will close the window. In this example, I'm making a sudden decision because how I feel right now. I will close the window because I'm cold right now. I will be at the library tomorrow. Again, you start with the subject and then will. After that, you have the base verb. You can use the be verb to talk about a confirmed plan. I will be at the library tomorrow. The economy will get better next year. In this case, the subject is the economy. Again, we follow with will and the base verb get. The economy will get better next year. I'm making a prediction here about something that will happen in the future. And finally, I will help you with your homework. I'm making a future plan to help you. I will help you with your homework. It doesn't say when, but I am talking about the future. Let's move on. You can also use be going to express a future action. It's almost the same as will. Here are some examples. There's no milk. I'm going to buy some. So what you see here is the subject and then the be verb am. I am. And then here we used a contraction, I'm. I'm going to buy some. I made a decision to buy some because there's no milk. The next sentence says, it looks like it's going to snow tomorrow. Here, the subject is it, and so I use the be verb is. It is. It's is the contraction. It's going to, and then we use the base verb, snow. The word tomorrow shows that this is a future action. He's going to take a trip in the summer. Because the subject is he, we use the be verb is, and we can use the contraction he's. He is or he's going to, and then the base verb take. Take a trip in the summer. Again, an action happening in the future. Let's move on. Now, let's take a look at the negative form of the future simple tense. The first example says, Stan will not like his English score. No matter what the subject is, we follow with will not and then the base form of the verb. Stan will not like his English score. We won't give you money anymore. In this case, the subject is we, and we follow with the contraction won't. It sounds really different, and it's different from other contractions, but won't is the contraction for will not. So you can say we will not or we won't. They're the same. We won't give you money anymore. Again, you notice the base verb give after not. He is not going to fly until next week. This sentence uses be going to. The subject is he, and therefore the be verb we use is. However, we put a not after the be verb. He is not going to, and then the base verb. He is not going to fly until next week. The last sentence says, you are not going to go to the party tonight. The subject is you, and so we use the be verb are. You are not going to go, that's the base verb, to the party tonight. Let's move on. Now, let's take a look at how to form basic questions in the future simple tense. The first sentence says, He will play with us. To turn this into a question, all we have to do is change the order of the first two words. So he will becomes will he. Will he play with us? The next sentence says, he is going to play with us. This one uses be going to. The subject is he, and so the be verb to use is. Then we have going to and then the base verb. He is going to play with us. When I make a question, I simply again change the order of the first two words. Is he going to play with us? Now, if the subject were to be you or we or they, we would say they are. And so the question would say, are they? Are they going to play with them, for example? So again, remember, for will in the future simple tense, just say will, subject, and then the base form of the verb. However, for be going to questions, make sure that you pay attention to the proper be verb to use at the beginning of the question. To answer the first question, will he play with us? You can say, yes, he will, or no, he won't. Is he going to play with us? You can say, yes, he's going to, or no, he isn't going to. Let's move on. Let's look at how to form WH questions in the future simple tense. If you notice, each question begins with a WH word. Who, when, where, and what. The first two sentences use will for the future simple tense. Who will win the game? To answer, I can say, my team will win the game. When will they arrive? They will arrive in 2 hours. Now, these two sentences have be going to. Where is he going to study? In this case, I have the be verb is because the subject is he. Where is he going to study? I can say he is going to study at the library. And finally, what are you going to do? In this case, I use the be verb are because the subject is you. What are you going to do? I am going to take a shower. Let's move on. For this checkup, let's take a look at the will usage for the future simple tense. The first example says Jen and Paul blank home soon with the verb go. Remember, when using will for the future simple tense, it doesn't matter what the subject is. We say will and then the base verb. So here we can say Jen and Paul, or they, will go home soon. I blank a scientist after I graduate. Try filling in the blank with be. Again, we simply say will be. I will be a scientist after I graduate. Now, try this one. We blank that because it smells bad. I want you to use the negative form with the verb eat. Here, we say will not eat. Or, remember, we can use the contraction won't. We will not eat that, or we won't eat that because it smells bad. Now, look for the mistake in this sentence. I will eat a pizza for lunch. Remember, we need the base form of the verb. I will eat a pizza for lunch. Angie and I will playing a game. Again, we need the base form of the verb. Angie and I will play a game. And finally, will she be cook dinner? This is a question. However, we need to say, will she cook dinner? We do not need a be verb here. Let's move on. Let's practice the be going to usage of the future simple tense. We blank going to blank soccer. I want you to use the verb watch. Remember, for be going to in the future simple tense, we start with the subject and then the be verb. The subject here is we, so we need the be verb are. We are going to, and then the base verb, watch. We are going to watch soccer. I blank going to blank. The verb is talk, and I want you to use the negative form. In this case, the subject is I, and so I use the be verb am. I am, and then we need not. I am not going to, then the base verb, talk. Why blank you going to blank? The verb here is go. In a question, especially a WH question, we start with the WH word and then the be verb. Are is the correct be verb because the subject is you. Then we have going to, and again, the base form of the verb. Why are you going to go? Now, try to find the mistake in the next sentence. You are going to studying at home. Can you find the mistake? You are going to, that's correct, but we need the base form of the verb. You are going to study at home. You will be going to learn English. You will be going? That sounds a little strange. Remember, we don't need the will here. We're using be going to. And we need to change the be to match the subject. You are going to learn English. Or remember, you can also say you will learn English. And finally, is he going to play soccer? Uh-oh, we have two verbs here. Is he going to? That's correct, but we have do and play. We don't need both. So we say, is he going to play soccer? Great job, everybody. Let's move on. Great job, everyone. You now have a better understanding of the future simple tense. There's still a lot of practice you need to do because this tense is so important. Keep studying and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everybody, I'm Esther. In this video, I will introduce the future continuous English grammar tense. This tense can be used to express an ongoing action in the future. I'll go over the basics of this lesson, and by the end, you'll have a better idea of when to use this tense. There's a lot to learn, so let's get started. One usage of the future continuous tense is to talk about an ongoing action that will happen in the future. We include when this action will be happening. We can use will be or be going to be to do this. Let's take a look at some examples. I will be taking the test soon. So you can see here we have the subject and then will be. After that, we include verb ing. The word soon at the end of this sentence indicates when this action will be happening. I am going to be taking the test soon. This sentence means the same thing as the first sentence, but instead of will be, we used be going to be. Here, the subject is I, and therefore we have the be verb am. I am going to be, and then verb ing. I am going to be taking the test soon. I can also use the contraction and say, I'm going to be taking the test soon. The next sentence says, he will be sleeping by 10 p.m. And the last sentence says, they are going to be, here because the subject is they, we use are, they are going to be studying, there's the verb ing, next October. By 10 p.m. and next October show when these actions will be happening. Let's move on. The future continuous tense is also used to show that a short action in the future is happening during, or while a longer action is in progress in the future. We can use the word when to show when the shorter action occurs. Take a look at the first example. I will be sleeping when they arrive. Here we see two actions. I will be sleeping and they arrive. The part of the sentence that's in the future continuous tense is the longer action that's in progress in the future. I will be sleeping. Remember, I will be and then verb ing. This is the action that is ongoing in the future. Then we see when they arrive. This is in the present tense. They arrive. This is the shorter action that happens while this action is ongoing. We will be having dinner when the movie starts. This is very similar to the first sentence. We will be having dinner. That's the ongoing action that will happen in the future. And while this is happening, the movie will start. But again, we use the present tense here. The movie starts. So we will be having dinner when the movie starts. Tina is going to be working when you leave. Remember, we can use be going to be in this tense. So, she is going to be working when you leave. This shorter action will happen while this ongoing action is in progress. And finally, it will be raining when you go shopping. Again, this is the ongoing action and this is the shorter action. Let's move on. Now, I'll talk about the negative form of the future continuous tense. Here are some examples. He will not be reading before bed. For the negative form, after the subject and will, we say not be and then verb ing. He will not be reading before bed. He'll be doing something else. The next sentence says, my dad won't be cheering when the game ends. So this is very similar to the first sentence. We have the subject, my dad, and instead of will not, we use the contraction won't. Remember, won't is a contraction for will not. My dad won't, and then we have be, verb ing. My dad won't be cheering when the game ends. The next sentence says, he is not going to be working tomorrow. Here we have the be going to be. So he is the subject, and so we use the be verb is. After the be verb, we say not. He is not going to be, verb ing. He is not going to be working tomorrow. Remember, we can also use a contraction here and say he isn't going to be working tomorrow. That's okay as well. We aren't going to be shopping on Sunday. Here, the subject is we, and so the be verb to use is are. I used a contraction here, aren't, for are not. We are not, or we aren't, going to be shopping on Sunday. Great job. Let's move on. Now, let's talk about how to form basic questions in the future continuous tense. Take a look at this first sentence. It says, he will be traveling next month. Now, to turn this into a question, all you have to do is change the order of the first two words. So, he will becomes will he. Will he be traveling next month? You'll notice that the rest of the words don't change, only the first two words. So, will he be traveling next month? To answer, you can say yes, he will, or no, he won't. The next sentence says, they are going to be living there. Again, to turn this into a question, simply switch the order of the first two words. They are becomes are they. Are they going to be living there? To reply, you can say yes, they are, or no, they aren't. Now you'll notice in these two sentences, there is no exact point in time that shows when this action will be happening in the future. There is no next month, or anything like that. In that case, it simply means sometime in the future. So, they are going to be living there sometime in the future. That's what that means. Great job, everyone. Let's move on. Now, I'll go into how to form WH questions in the future continuous tense. Take a look at the board. First, you'll notice that all of these questions begin with the WH word. Where, what, who, and when. Let's take a look at the first question. Where will he be working? When we use will be, we start with where and then will. After that, we have the subject, be, and then verb ing. Where will he be working? I can answer by saying he will or he'll be working at the factory. The next question says, what will she be watching? This is very similar to the first question. The only difference is that the subject is now she and the verb is different. What will she be watching? I can say she'll be watching or she will be watching her favorite TV show. Who will they be talking to? Again, very similar. To answer, I can say they will be talking to their mom. The last question has be going to be. When are we? Here, the subject is we, so we start with the be verb are. When are we going to be meeting Casey? I can say we are going to be meeting Casey later tonight. Good job, everybody. Let's move on. Let's start a checkup for the future continuous tense. Take a look at the first sentence. It says they blank at school tomorrow. I want you to use will and then the verb study for this tense. Remember, in the future continuous tense, no matter what the subject, we say will be and then verb ing. So the correct answer for this sentence is they will be studying. They will be studying at school tomorrow. The next sentence says Jesse blank a TV show later. Here, instead of will, try to use be going to be. Jesse blank watch a TV show later. I want you to use the verb watch. So, Jesse is a he, or it can be a she. Sometimes the name is used for a boy or a girl. Either way, I need to use the be verb is. Jesse is going to be, and then we need verb ing. Jesse is going to be watching a TV show later. The next sentence, I want you to find the mistake. We willn't be studying at the library today. We will not. What's the contraction for will not? Well, it definitely isn't willn't. The contraction is won't. We won't be studying at the library today. And finally, Sally and I will be meet our friends soon. Remember, we need will be and then verb ing. So the correct answer is Sally and I will be meeting our friends soon. Good job, everyone. Let's move on. Now, let's move on to the next checkup of the future continuous tense. Take a look at the first sentence. It says he blank at the door when the movie ends. I want you to use will and the verb wait. Remember, for this tense, we need will be and then verb ing. So the correct answer is he will be waiting at the door when the movie ends. The next sentence says we are not, so this is a negative, blank the play when he performs. Here, instead of will, I want you to use be going to be and the verb see. We already have part of that phrase for you. We are, here's the be verb, not, so this is negative, and then we say going to be, and then verb ing. We are not going to be seeing the play when he performs. Now, find the mistake in this sentence. They won't be stay at home when the delivery man visits. They won't be. That's correct in the negative form. However, we need verb ing. They won't be staying at home when the delivery man visits. And finally, Terry is going to working when the manager arrives. Terry is a he or she, so is the correct be verb to use. Going to, that's also correct. What we're missing here is be. Terry is going to be working when the manager arrives. Good job, everybody. Let's move on. Now you have a better understanding of the future continuous tense. Please take some time to study and practice this tense as it is very important. I know English can be a struggle, but don't worry, I'm here for you and I believe in you. I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone, I'm Esther. In this video, I will introduce the future perfect tense. This tense is used to express an action in the future that will happen by a specific time in the future. This tense can be a little difficult to understand, but don't worry, I will guide you through it. So keep watching. The future perfect tense is used to express an action in the future that will happen by a specific time in the future. Let's look at some examples. The first sentence says, the snow will have stopped by April. We start with the subject, in this case, the snow. Then we follow with will have and the past participle of the verb. In this case, we used stopped for the verb stop. At the end of the sentence, you'll notice by April. By April shows the specific time in the future when this action will have happened. The next sentence says, by the time he graduates, he will have completed 5 years of study. In this sentence, by the time he graduates, or the specific time in the future, comes at the beginning of the sentence. So, by plus a time in the future can come at the end, or it can come at the beginning. By the time he graduates, he will have completed. Again, you see subject, will have, and the past participle of the verb, in this case, completed. By the time he graduates, he will have completed 5 years of study. The next sentence says, her arm will have fully healed by the summer. In this example, by the summer, the future specific time comes at the end. By this time in the future, her arm, that's the subject, will have healed, the past participle. Here, I put fully just to show how much it will have healed. I'm just adding an extra description. The last sentence says, by next month. So here we see by and the time at the beginning of the sentence. You, that's the subject, will have received, there's the past participle, your promotion. Again, by next month, you will have received your promotion. Let's move on. Now, let's talk about the negative form of the future perfect tense. Here are some examples. Let's take a look. The first sentence says, I will not have graduated from university by July. First, I want to point out that at the end, I have the specific time in the future, by July. Now, for the negative form, what I do is say subject and will not have. Then we put the past participle of the verb. I will not have graduated from university by July. The next sentence says, Ollie and Max will not have spoken. There it is again. Will not have, and then the past participle of speak, which is spoken. Before the plane leaves. Here, instead of the word by, we used before to show a specific time in the future. That's okay as well. The next sentence says, you will not have eaten dinner by 6 p.m. Here, again, we've used by 6 p.m. to show a time in the future. And again, you see, you will not have, and then the past participle of eat, which is eaten. The last sentence says, by noon, there's the time again, I will not have taken off to Japan. Taken is the past participle of take. Let's move on. Now, let's move on to how to form questions in the future perfect tense. The first sentence here says, you will have gone to work by 10 a.m. To turn this into a question, all we have to do is switch the order of the first two words. You will becomes will you. You'll notice that the rest of the question stays the same as the sentence. Will you have gone to work by 10 a.m.? You can answer by saying, yes, I will have, or no, I will have not. The next sentence says, she will have woken up by noon. Again, to turn this into a question, just switch the first two words. She will becomes will she. Will she have woken up by noon? Again, the rest of the sentence stays the same. Will she have woken up by noon? To reply, you can say, yes, she will have, or no, she will have not. Let's move on. Now, I'll talk about how to form WH questions in the future perfect tense. If you notice on the board, each of these questions begins with the WH word. Where, what, who, and when. Then, after each WH word comes the word will. Where will, what will, who will, and when will. So, let's take a look at the first question. Where will? Then you add the subject, in this case, you. And then have, and after that, the past participle of the verb. In this case, it's traveled. Where will you have traveled by December? I can answer by saying I will have traveled to Germany and Denmark. There are many possible answers here, and this is just an example. The next question says, what will they have done? Done is the past participle of do by the end of the evening. I can answer by saying they will have done their homework. The next question says, who will she have interviewed by 5 p.m.? Again, who will, the subject, have, and the past participle of the verb. I can answer this question by saying she will have interviewed the teachers by 5 p.m. And finally, when will they have started to learn? One way to answer this question is to say they will have started to learn in January. Let's move on. Let's start this checkup for the future perfect tense. Take a look at the first sentence. It says, we blank that book by tomorrow. The verb to use is read. Remember, in the future perfect tense, we start with the subject, and we have that here, we. Then we say will have and the past participle of the verb. So here we need to say will have. What is the past participle of read? The correct answer is read. They're spelled the same, but they are pronounced differently. We will have read that book by tomorrow. The next sentence says, she blank the video by bedtime. Here we have not, so I want you to try the negative form, and the verb to try is watch. In the negative form, we start with the subject, and instead of will have, we say will not have. She will not have. Then we need the past participle of the verb. In this case, it is watched. She will not have watched the video by bedtime. Now, find the mistake in the next sentence. Ryan will not have been to Cuba by summer. This is the negative form because we have will not have. That's correct, but we need the past participle of be. So we need to change it to been. Ryan will not have been to Cuba by summer. The last sentence says, I will have go to school by 8:30 a.m. Here we have the affirmative, will have. But, we forgot the past participle of go, which is gone. I will have gone to school by 8:30 a.m. Great job, everybody. Let's move on. Good job, guys. Now you have a better understanding of the future perfect tense. I want you to keep studying and practicing this tense. I know studying English can be difficult, but I believe in you and I will guide you through it. I'll see you in the next video. Hi everybody, I'm Esther. Welcome to the last tense. If you haven't checked out my earlier videos on the tenses, please go check them out now. In this video, I will talk about the future perfect continuous tense. This tense can be used to describe an ongoing action or situation that will last for a specified period of time in the future. There's a lot to learn, so keep watching. The future perfect continuous tense is used to talk about an ongoing situation that will be in progress for a period of time at a specific point in time in the future. Let's take a look at some examples. The first sentence says, she will have been living in Ireland for 10 years at that point. So no matter what the subject, in this case we have she, we follow with will have been and then verb ing. So she will have been living in Ireland. Then this sentence has the duration. What period of time will this last? For 10 years. And when? Remember, we need a point in time in the future. In this case, we just use a general expression, at that point. Here, it's not specific, and that's okay. We'll see some specific examples in the next sentence. By midnight, he will have been sleeping for 4 hours. Here, the specific time in the future comes at the beginning of the sentence, by midnight. And again, we see will have been, verb ing. By midnight, he will have been sleeping. Here we have for 4 hours. This shows the duration or how long this action will be in progress. So again, by midnight, he will have been sleeping for 4 hours. The last sentence says in June. Here, again, we have the specific time in the future at the beginning of the sentence. In June, we, that's the subject, will have been studying, there's the verb ing, at this university for 4 years. Here is the duration, for 4 years. Good job, and let's move on. Now, let's look at the negative form of the future perfect continuous tense. In the affirmative form, we say subject, will have been, and then verb ing. In the negative form, however, we say subject, will not have been, and then verb ing. Let's take a look at some examples. The first sentence here says, at that point, I will not have been living in Spain for 10 years. And so you see it. I is the subject, will not have been, and then verb ing, in this case, living. The next sentence says, he will not have been sleeping for 4 hours by midnight. Again, we see the subject, will not have been, and then verb ing, sleeping. The last sentence says, by then, we will not have been studying at this university for 3 years. Again, we see the subject, we, will not have been, and then verb ing. Here, studying. Let's move on. Now, let's take a look at how to form questions in the future perfect continuous tense. Here, the sentence says, Sean will have been playing soccer for a year by December. To turn this into a question, all we have to do is switch the order of the first two words. So instead of Sean will, I can say, will Sean? Will Sean have been playing soccer for a year by December? You'll notice that the rest of the sentence stays the same. I can answer by saying, yes, he will have, or no, he will have not. The next sentence says, they will have been working there for 3 months by that time. Again, I change the order of the first two words to turn this into a question. They will becomes will they. Will they have been working there for 3 months by that time? Again, the rest of the sentence stays the same. I can answer by saying, yes, they will have, or no, they will have not. Let's move on. Now, let's take a look at how to form WH questions in the future perfect continuous tense. Take a look at the board. All of these questions begin with a WH word. Where, what, who, and how long. Take a look at the first question. Where will you have been walking? To form a WH question, we start with the WH word, then will. After that, we add the subject, you, they, she, and you. After that, we add have been, verb, ing. Where will you have been walking? What will they have been playing? Who will she have been talking to? And how long will you have been working? There's the verb ing there by the time you finish. So let's go through one more time and I'll show you how to answer these questions. Where will you have been walking? I can answer by saying, I will have been walking in the park. What will they have been playing? They will have been playing video games. Who will she have been talking to? She will have been talking to her cousin. And finally, how long will you have been working there by the time you finish? By the time I finish, I will have been working there for 5 years. Let's move on. Let's start a checkup for the future perfect continuous tense. Take a look at the board. The first sentence says, by 10 p.m., I blank that game for 3 hours. I'm looking to use the verb play. Remember, in this tense, we need to have subject, will have been, and then verb ing. So, by 10 p.m., I will have been playing, again, we need verb ing. I will have been playing that game for 3 hours. The next sentence says, when she gets here, he blank dinner for an hour. Try to use the verb cook. Again, no matter what the subject, it doesn't change. When she gets here, he will have been cooking. When she gets here, he will have been cooking dinner for an hour. Now, find the mistake in the next sentence. Steve and Jan will not have been waiting for a year when it arrives. Here we have a negative form. They will not have. Then we need been. They will not have been. And then the verb ing is here, so that's correct. Steve and Jan will not have been waiting for a year when it arrives. The last sentence says, it will have been work for 10 years on January 15th. So maybe here I'm talking about a computer or a TV. maybe some kind of machine. It. It will have been, I see the mistake here. We need verb ing. It will have been working for 10 years on January 15th. Great job, everybody. Let's move on. Thank you so much for watching this course on the 12 English tenses. Now, you have a better understanding of how to use these tenses. I know studying English can be hard, but with time and practice, you will get better. Please watch my other videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye!